This podcast is funded by Ted Dintersmith, the executive producer of the acclaimed film Most Likely to Succeed, and the author of the best-selling book What School Could Be.
I'm Josh Rapoon, and this is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast. The first season of this podcast took the world by storm, racking up 14,000 downloads in 40 countries worldwide. Clearly, we tapped into a global hunger for ideas and stories from imaginative and innovative educators and education leaders engaging students across the Hawaiian Isles. In the middle of a pandemic, we pivoted and took the second season of this series virtual. I built a compact podcast studio in my home on Oahu, and physically distant guests call in via their mobile phones. In the last episode, I talked with Dan Gaudiano, the Academy Science Department head at Punahou School. Dan and I did a deep dive into science research, competency-based learning, design thinking, student travel, and much, much more. It was awesome. Today, I'll be talking with Buffy Cushman-Patz, the executive director at SEEQS, the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability. SEEQS is a secondary public charter school in Honolulu, Hawaii, founded in 2013. It currently serves approximately 180 students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. SEEQS offers a community-focused, interdisciplinary, project-based, tuition-free secondary school experience for Oahu families. In 2010 and 2011, Buffy was honored with an Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship. She served her fellowship year at the National Science Foundation's Office of Legislative and Public Affairs. Buffy completed her master's in school leadership at the Harvard Graduate School of Education in May 2012. This interview is particularly wonderful for me because I was on the team Buffy assembled to write SEEQS' charter. Buffy has been a strong and clear voice for education redesign in Hawaii. She is a member of the Hawaii Innovative Leadership Network and a mentor to other public, private, and charter school leaders in this state. And now, here's my conversation with Buffy Cushman-Patz. Buffy Cushman-Patz, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh.
So I'm really excited about this, Buffy. I've been waiting a long time to interview you, so I just had to say that at the beginning here. This is going to be so much fun. So, Buffy, our format is 10 questions. So I'm going to roll through 10 questions with you, and you just go ahead and knock them out of the park. So we're going to jump into question number 1. So
all right.
I'm going to do this interview differently than anything I've done in the past. I'm going to call this conversation a deep dive into SEEQS Genome. So let's roll the dice and see what happens, okay? So let's start with an explanation of what SEEQS is. However, let's not over-explain it and give away all of its gems at once. Let's just start with a relatively brief overlay. So what is SEEQS?
SEEQS is the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability, and the name really does describe what it is and what we do. And, had you asked me to describe this succinctly a year or two ago, it's really hard. It was hard to do an elevator pitch, but I've been really working on thinking about, what are the key elements of the model, and it's this. First, community. And I like to think about this in terms of an analogy with a seed sprouting into a tree. But the most important part of all that, the foundation, is the soil. And community is the soil of everything we do at SEEQS. We have a lot of explicit structures to build, maintain, and if necessary, restore community. And we think of community as the soil. The seeds that get planted in that soil are the content, the disciplinary content knowledge. And we want not knowledge and skills. That happens in core content courses, math, science, English, social studies, arts. And it's really helping students learn to love the disciplines for the sake of them. Love reading for the sake of reading. Love math because it's cool and interesting. Science because it helps you understand the world around you. So the content are the seeds that get planted in that soil. But then we want to make sure that we nurture and water that soil. And we do that, nurturing and watering, in our interdisciplinary project-based courses that we call SEEQS, our Essential Question of Sustainability course. And that is a multidisciplinary course taught by multiple teachers. And in most years, it's a multi-age course. And it's 8 hours a week, 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, where students are examining essential question of sustainability over the course of a year and really digging deeply into complex issues, and then ultimately developing a project, a teacher-led project first semester, and then a project that they've designed themselves for second semester. So that's the place where they can apply the skills and tools they learn from those seeds. They can water those seeds in that afternoon course. Now, our basic theory here is that this combination of community plus content plus interdisciplinary project-based courses helps students develop what we call our sustainability skills. And those sustainability skills are basically our learner profile: thinking systemically, managing effectively, reasoning analytically, collaborating productively, and communicating powerfully. And our theory of action is that students will develop those skills through the combination of the community, the content courses, and the SEEQS courses. And so they demonstrate, they basically sprout those sustainability skills. And then our ultimate goal is that seekers will be stewards of planet Earth and healthy, effective citizens of the world. And we're helping them develop all of those things over their time at SEEQS so that they can ultimately grow into trees. That's the basic model.
Awesome. And so it seems appropriate. Where is SEEQS located? And I understand that you have a unique relationship with a public school here in Hawaii, a regular public school.
Yes, a DOE public school. We currently share the campus with Kaimuki High School. That's not necessarily a forever relationship. And it was, so one of the things we've really been thinking about a lot lately in both, well, let me answer your question directly. First, we were in Kaimuki, on the edge of Kaimuki Kahala at the Salvation Army property where we rented for 4 years. Then we moved to the campus of Kaimuki High School. Right now we exist in sort of the virtual space. And we really pride ourselves on being adaptable. One of the founding principles of our school is that a learning environment is composed of its community, cultural values, and physical surroundings. And so our school has adapted as it has been in different environments. And that's actually one of the fundamental principles of our school is becoming the learning environment that we are based on who we are and where we are.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. And we'll come back to that adaptation issue at the very end of this interview. So, okay. So here's the second question. Buffy, you earned a Bachelor of Science in Geology from the University of Florida. Go Gators. Mm-hmm. And you that's right. And you earned a Master's in Science and Geology and Geophysics from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So in what ways did your love of geology and geophysics inform or influence how SEEQS became SEEQS? In other words, in what ways are these degrees and the learning that you did part of the DNA of SEEQS?
Sometimes it's hard to even recognize your own DNA because it's so inherent in you, right? So I will do my best to answer that. And I'll say, I'm going to start with this. What I love about geology, what hooked me on geology is plate tectonics. Plate tectonics explains everything about the natural world around us. I mean, not really everything, but really at this meta scale, this concept of these plates moving around relative to each other explain mountains, explain ocean basins, explain rivers, and then all the erosion and deposition. So these meta processes, I found them just so engaging and helped me, they shaped my worldview basically once I got exposed to them in college. And I think that also the thing about being a geologist in geology is that you understand time and a really different time scale. Geologic time is, over millions and millions of years. And you get to examine how the Earth has changed over time. And I think that really gives, this inherent understanding of elements of sustainability, really, or elements of how the planet works, which then makes you all the more aware of what's happening with our planet right now and on what time scale. And that time scale is so different than the time scale that's happened naturally through Earth's history. So that the boy's geology influences SEEQS, but I think also that geology is so inherently, like, you can learn about it in a book, but it doesn't mean much. When it really becomes meaningful, and for me, the most powerful experience for me was when I was in an honors class in my undergrad at University of Florida, and my professor showed us a video that he had taken from the bottom of the ocean in the Alvin submersible of black smokers at the hydrothermal vent at a mid-ocean ridge. And it just came alive. And I gave myself chicken skin right now just thinking about it. I remember,
yes, me too.
I remember sitting in that basement. The geology department was in the basement. I remember sitting in that small classroom, watching that video, and just my mind exploding. That guy standing right there at the front of this classroom took this video at the bottom of the ocean. It was just this like, oh my God, science is like a thing. It's being done by people. It just shifted my brain just shifted in that moment from science being a thing that was in a book, a set of facts, to science being real, alive, based on observations, based on what humans are doing. And it shifted everything for me. And I think honestly, just a big part of my drive as an educator is just bummed that it took me till I was almost 20 years old to have that experience and that understanding of science. And I want that for students so much earlier because it shaped my worldview, but I was 20. I could have done so much more. I was smart. I was talented. I was capable. I could have done so much more if I had a worldview that was more helpful in really understanding how the world works. And so I think that SEEQS is at some level designed SEEQS is designed to make sure that students have meaningful learning experiences when they're 11, 12, 13 years old.
And wow, you've already, we're only 10 minutes into this, Buffy, and you've already given me an awesome gift, which is, here in 2020, oh my God, how is it not possible to be kind of freaked out about what's happening in the world and everything that's going on in the world? And you've suddenly given me a sense of calm because the tectonic plates are moving very slowly and we don't matter and I don't matter. And I can just relax into that thought. Oh, that makes me feel so much better. So perfect. So actually that's a great segue into this question, which is, back in 2010, while you were teaching science at La Pietra Hawaii School for Girls, you did something called the Teacher at Sea Groovy Cruise to the Galapagos Islands, where you did, in fact, a deep dive to the bottom of the ocean in Alvin, a famous diving submarine. And while on that dive, you talked to La Pietra students via some sort of a satellite phone link. And I recall that like it was yesterday, and I was in the room when it happened. And so in what ways did that experience shape how SEEQS was eventually designed several years later? In other words, where do we find the groovy in SEEQS DNA?
It's interesting. I would say that was... at some level, that was part of the transition for me because I had been a scientist, I had been a scientist, and that, going down in the Alvin submersible on that groovy cruise was actually my 4th and 5th Alvin dives because I had had the opportunity on multiple cruises, research cruises, prior to becoming a teacher when I was getting my degrees in my master's degree, but even prior to my master's degree work, I was able to go down in Alvin, frankly, thanks to that professor who first inspired me. He became my mentor, still a friend to this day, but he helped set me up on those research experiences that then shifted me to becoming a graduate student, moved me out to Hawaii for the graduate program at the University of Hawaii. The groovy cruise itself was really kind of a transition. I think one of the things I realized So I'm going to go back to my DNA a little bit more. My mom was a teacher. My mom was a long-time educator. I grew up in a house with a mom who was a teacher and a dad who was a criminal defense attorney, actually. And, you know, what your parents do and what they believe and how they live their life obviously influences who you are. So that is very much a part of my DNA. And specifically, my mom was a teacher, spending my afternoons in her classrooms. I've long paid attention to how people learn and also how I learn. And I think my experiences as a graduate student, I experienced this disconnect between what I knew about how we learn about science and honestly some of my graduate level classes and how they were taught were really, that disconnect was frustrating for me. So I felt this kind of personal mission as I was transitioning from graduate school, from being a geologist, because I was on a path to being a research scientist, and I had to go through a pretty big, one of the biggest decisions I've made in my life was to not finish the PhD program, to get a master's instead, and the shift into education, which I had finally come to terms with what my true love was. And so I think that in that transition, the way that I did it was I felt this passion to helping scientists understand how they could create meaningful learning experiences or how they could help facilitate or foster meaningful learning experiences for kids in schools. And so that UV cruise experience was one of the ways that I felt like I could help bridge. I felt that I uniquely, you know, I'm not the only person in the world. There's plenty of us that have this set of skills, but I had one, I like to think of it as I speak scientist. I spoke it better then. I'm no longer fluent, but at the time I was fluent in speaking scientist and speaking kids and speaking, you know, regular person speak to understand these complex concepts, but without necessarily the, you know, very specific lingo. And so I think that UV cruise was an opportunity for me because I was able to help them write the proposal to the National Science Foundation to get that cruise funded. And I was part of their broader impacts to the National Science Foundation grant part of their broader impacts was to have me come along as a teacher at SEEQS. And I think I was able to help them do that because I spoke scientist, and then I was able to actually have this meaningful, you know, connection with kids. I mean, because I did that call, but I also did a blog the entire time. That's before blogs.
Oh yeah, I remember the blog.
Yeah, and that blog was really about me trying to convey what this experience at sea was like to regular people, and I think I did it pretty successfully. And I'm not unique in this. Other people have done this for sure. There's a Teacher at Sea program that is robust and meaningful. But it was an experience that I had that I enjoyed, and it kind of bridged my two worlds and kind of transitioned me into education as a full-time gig.
And
it wasn't. I was already an educator by that time. Sorry, I'm mixing up my chronology.
You were. Yeah. So SEEQS, in fact, reflects that idea. And by the way, you sort of helped me understand another thing here, which is that my mom and dad also, probably not deliberately, but were doing it instinctually, were providing me and with my brothers and my sister with super engaging learning opportunities that were far outside of regular school. And that I realize sort of now that drove me forward as a teacher as well. Not the formal education that I did. But so SEEQS in a way is reflective of that sense on your part of what that means, that you're working in a duality between speaking science and speaking to kids. And that's probably true for many people in their different fields that they come from. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'd say, honestly, here's the reality. I'm not the teacher at SEEQS, right?
Yeah.
and I haven't been. And so it's my job is, as first the school leader and now the executive director, is to make sure that the teachers who we hire at SEEQS and that create these, teachers are the ones creating meaningful learning experiences for students now, and to make sure that we hire people that value those learning experiences above all else.
Right.
And, the thing that I'm most compelled to respond to about what you said is that your parents were creating your parents provided you with meaningful learning experiences. I think, Josh, that's where real learning happens. Like, but I'm a parent now. I wasn't a parent when I became an educator, but I'm a parent now. I feel the responsibility for my children to have meaningful learning experiences, and especially now in this pandemic. But in general, that's what we do as parents, is we provide rich learning. We provide the soil. We provide these rich learning experiences and opportunities for our kids. And I think that somehow in society, over the last, I don't know how long, we've kind of delegated that responsibility to schools. And I think that that's not quite right. I mean, I actually have stronger feelings in that, but I'm not going to say it so overtly right now. But I think that when we give away that primary responsibility to an institution or institutions, we've kind of give up on our collective responsibility as society to raise good humans. And then we try and delegate that. And I think that SEEQS is a place where we're not delegating that. We're trying to work together, but most importantly, we're trying to help students have those meaningful learning experiences, whether or not, because not everybody has the same opportunity at home. They have working parents, they have one parent, everybody's got different situations at home. So I think one of the ways that schools can function is to help everyone have meaningful learning experiences.
Right.
But that is, of course, what schools should be.
Right. Okay, so let's move to a different part of your life, Buffy. So you volunteered with Teachers Without Borders in 2008 and 2010, leading math and science workshops for teachers in South Africa. And this is a program organized in Hawaii by Eunice Peer, an educator at Punahou School and one of my personal superheroes for sure. So what was that experience, and in what ways did it inform the design of SEEQS as you began to think about it in 2011 and then as it was executed in 2013? In other words, where in SEEQS DNA do we find the concept or the idea or the theory behind Teachers Without Borders?
So Eunice reminds me of this occasionally. Like, he remembers a moment when we were in a particular part of South Africa on a walk through a forest when I apparently said, I want to start a school. I don't actually remember that moment, but Eunice is confident that it happened in South Africa. But I'd say I'm going to give another specific example of something that's part of the DNA of SEEQS is that, so the first time I went, in 2008, I led science workshops. So the basic concept of Teachers Without Borders, now called Teachers Across Borders, is that Eunice brings a team of U.S.-based math and science teachers to help lead teacher workshops in South Africa for teachers, because one of the things that is the driver of it is that during the years of apartheid, non-whites were not educated in math and science. But now, in post-apartheid years, the folks have to teach math and science who didn't necessarily have explicit education in math and science. And so one of the things that we did in the Teachers Without Borders program is to just go peer-to-peer, lead peer-to-peer workshops and say, and they don't have a lot of resources and they have large classes. And so we would try and share with them some experiential ideas that we had for what we were able to do in some math classes and some science classes. And in some opportunities, we ended up, teaching the concepts at the same time as we taught them how to teach the concepts. I'm conscious right now of sounding like the Great White Hope, but
no,
I don't think that we were that. I think the way we were received was it was peer-to-peer, and it was just such a powerful, I would say for me, Josh, the most powerful part of that experience in 2008 was I realized, it's a really big shift to realize that you can educate, to going from I know how to educate students to I can actually help my peers. I can help other adults.
Right.
So that was the most powerful part of it for me in 2008, was realizing, wow, the same basic concepts of how I interact with students actually working with other adults as well. That was really powerful. And then in 2010, I helped lead math workshops, and the way that we did it, Eunice this was all about iteration, and every year was a little bit different. In 2010, the way that we did it was we did partners. So I ended up co-leading a series of math workshops with Kwesi, who's a South African who had participated in Teachers Without Borders workshops in previous years and had a role in South Africa where he was sort of kind of like, you might say, like a complex area superintendent or something like that, where he was a leader among leaders. Okay. And we co-led a math workshop. I think our topics were probability. And we had a couple of topics that were assigned to us that we were doing, and we had never worked together before. And yet we both had a fundamental understanding of math. We both had some ideas of activities to do. And we worked together so well. He would share something, and then I would jump in and add to it. And then I would lead something, and he would jump in and add to it. And it was such a powerful experience to co-lead with someone else. And I would say that wasn't the first time I had had that experience. Actually, I think it was the first time. It wasn't the last time I had that experience. But that one was so shifting for me because, you know, we talk about collaborative teaching and we talk about interdisciplinary stuff, but the actual experience of doing something with another adult that the outcome was better together than either one of us could have done individually. It was so fulfilling. It was so incredibly fulfilling. I rode the highs from that for years from that. And that is built into the DNA of SEEQS because our EQS courses are, by design, co-taught by 4 or 5 different teachers, sharing the same physical space. One, you know, they might take turns with who's the lead on this, but they jump in with each other. And the other thing about SEEQS is that we have a inclusion model, and every one of our content courses has 2 adults in it, whether the second adult is a special education teacher or an academic inclusion specialist or an educational assistant, but we have 2 adults in every class. And so it's inherent, that idea of 2 people together can usually do something better than one alone could do. And there's lots of different ways to make that work. And every pair or group of 4 has to work it out, but it's inherent in the SEEQS model.
Wow. I've co-taught multiple times and can speak directly to the power of that concept. And I'm just like, I know I'm an education geek, but I'm in serious chicken skin right now listening to you, talk about that, because it the way that it's so embedded deep in SEEQS DNA, it just means that there's this powerful collaborative ethic that's going on every day, all day long. And that's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing.
Well, I just want to name, Josh, that you and I, back when we taught together, we fantasized about this. I mean, I specifically remember the conversations we would sit and have at lunchtime where you would tell me about this primary document work that students were doing in your social studies classes, and I would tell you about the work my students were doing in physics and chemistry classes, and we just were kind of wide-eyed looking at each other saying, that's the same basic skill set. Wow, your historical thinking and my scientific thinking. And most education happens in silos, and that was what was happening because that's the design of most schools. And so, I would teach kids the scientific method, which I don't really believe in as such, but, how to think like a scientist. You would teach kids how to think like a historian. Right. And we would fantasize about wow, what if we could do that together and help kids make that explicit connection, right? Yes. Yep. Well, guess what? That's what they do in EQS. Yeah. EQS is designed to help kids make the explicit connection between different disciplines, and also that transfer between what they learn in their morning classes, math for the sake of math, science for the love of investigations, and then in the afternoon it's I'm going to go apply that in this different scenario where we're doing stream work, and I need to think about all the folks on the, in the surrounding community, so I need to use my, not just historical thinking skills, but social thinking skills and evaluating multiple perspectives. But I also need to use what I learned in my science classes about taking accurate data and drawing conclusions from that, right? So it's just the concept of EQS is let's not silo. Silos are manufactured. Real life is interdisciplinary. Right. And the adults love it too. I would say the number one thing that teachers at SEEQS say that they love about working at SEEQS is that they get to be learners too. Because there's no way to not be.
Yep. That's awesome. Okay, so hey, listeners, let's take a minute to reintroduce today's guest. Buffy Cushman-Patz is the executive director of SEEQS, the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability. She is also a member of the Hawaii Innovative Leaders Network. So Buffy, the Hawaii State Legislature passed the state's charter school law in 1994. And as originally passed, the law authorized up to 25 existing schools to become, quote, student-centered schools. And the state's first such school opened in 1995. So here's my question. Where in SEEQS DNA do we find the spirit and the intent of Hawaii's original charter school law? And I'll say parenthetically, hopefully, as we work through this, folks listening will understand charters in general a little bit better, a little bit more, because charters are pretty controversial topics across the country, especially right now.
Charters are so different in Hawaii than they are anywhere else in the United States. And I almost wish that we had a different name. I wish that charters could be called innovation schools or something, or community-based schools, because I think that's the place where what we do at SEEQS is really in the spirit of the original concept of charter schools, which now I just want to name that there's multiple different things. First of all, I wasn't a charter leader back at the time of the original law passing. And I want to give a shout out to those folks who are still in leadership of the world of charter schools, who have been in it for a long time, know this history better than I do, and also know its origins better than I do. But I'm going to say that what I have deduced over the years of becoming, of becoming what I am in the world of charter schools is that charters are inherently community-based, that we are responsive to and serve our communities. And what a community looks like is different in different places, right? I mean, there's schools on every island and that serve the specific parts of the island. SEEQS as a Honolulu-based school, I can tell you that at the time of our development, the community needs that I think that you and I, were part of the founding of SEEQS too, that we know that what we were responding to at the time was this sense that folks, specifically around the transition to middle school, sometimes as late as high school, but really around the middle school transition, parents want to choose a school. Parents want to choose schools because they really know something about their kids at that time, and they know something about their families and their own values, and they don't necessarily just want to go to the neighborhood school. They start looking for, what do different schools offer, and what do I want for my family and my child? And it seemed at the time of the founding of SEEQS that families felt like they had to, in order to have choice. Now, this is my perception. I do not mean to make a statement that I knew what everybody was thinking. This is my perception based on my role as an educator and living. At that time, I had lived in Hawaii for 12 or 13 years. I've been here since 1999. But my perception was that folks felt like if they wanted to choose a school, they needed to choose a private school. And I learned from so many families, where we were teaching at the time, I mean, so many families were sacrificing so much quality of life so that they could pay to send their children to private school because they didn't feel like they could get what they wanted from their neighborhood public school. And so at the time of SEEQS' founding, it was, let's offer a school of choice that families feel like they can consider among their neighborhood school option, the geographic exception option, private school options, but let's make a charter school of choice that aligns with values. So I think, there's a long way of answering because the Honolulu community is so big, most communities are smaller than that. Right? Most charter schools serve smaller communities. Those of us charter schools that are serving the Honolulu community, you're trying to meet the needs of a pretty big population, and we're only a small school that fits into that. So really, it was like, how do we become another positive choice for families that want to choose the right education environment for their child?
Is it fair to say, Buffy, that your entire SEEQS community is very aware that you are a choice?
We make a point of it, actually. Yeah, we make sure that folks know that we are a school of choice, which, the fact that we have not always been at the same place makes that obvious. But we do a lot of open house sessions throughout the fall and spring, and really, really encourage prospective families to come to them and for the students to come to them, and we say, here's what we are and here's what we believe. Right. If this feels like a good fit for your family, then please come. So, and I want to be clear about that. There's two things about that. One is, I actually believe that the way that we're educating at SEEQS is best for almost all kids. I don't think that there's some kids who learn best in some sort of lecture-based traditional school environment. They might succeed, they might get good grades and good test scores, but I don't think they actually learn best in that environment. True learning happens through experiences, and that is what we are trying to create at SEEQS. So I genuinely believe that the education we're providing is a really good education for almost all students. However, I also want families to believe that. I don't want, and this is it's an opportunity we have as a charter school, is to, I don't want us to be arguing what we're doing within our community. I want folks to say, like, this is what I'm signing up for. I signed up for it. If it turns out that this is not what I believe in or what I want for my child, then they can opt out.
Right. Right. Okay. So follow-up question then, also baked into the original 1994 law was the idea that these 25 charter schools and any that came after that would also serve as sort of demonstration schools, or would be potential models for other schools, even public and private, to look at for as sources of innovation. So is that idea, is that spirit, is that intent baked into SEEQS? And I understand it would be a humble bake, right? That you wouldn't see yourselves as better than anybody else, but that that your doors are open to anyone who wants to examine who you are and how you work and what your DNA is.
Yeah, pretty much exactly that, Josh. Almost exactly the way you said it is that. So what I think, in Hawaii, we have this Department of Education that's so large, that serves so many students in so many ways that because it's so large, change can't really happen systemically very quickly. It can happen at sort of the classroom level and sometimes the school level. And I know the current superintendent really wants to give schools more autonomy to make school-based decisions, but that's what charter schools have by design, is school-based decision-making, and we have the ability to adapt quickly, to change quickly, and we can try something out and figure out, did this work? Nope, didn't work. We can change it next year if we want. We can change it next quarter if we want. We can change it next week if we want to, with a little bit of dizziness involved in quick changes. But that is the opportunity that charters have, is to try things out, figure out what works and what doesn't, and not necessarily have to have a whole system figure that out at once. But however, I will say that I do think of charter schools in general as an opportunity to serve as a research and development arm of the public school system. But the missing piece, or the piece that must be present in order for that to work, is some sort of communication about here's what we learned, here's what's working, here's what we tried and didn't work. So it's a transparency on our part, but also, some sort of pathway for that information transfer to happen. What we do on our part to facilitate that transfer is we have pretty much open doors. We have student ambassadors who, in normal years, lead student-led tours. We have an open door policy. People come, open door policy once you're on a tour. You can't just walk onto our campus and look around, but you can sign up, say, I'd like to come visit. We love sharing with other educators what's happening in our school, especially from the student perspective, and they talk about what's happening and how it feels to them, because, at the center of all this, obviously, is students.
Right.
Students are the center of our work as educators, and so we can think we're doing all the greatest things in the world, but what matters the most is what is it like for students. And so that's why we have our students give our tours. But that is one of the things that we try to do to service anyone else who wants to learn from us. And we are pretty open. Kids are open about it too. We're pretty open about what we've tried that hasn't worked as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Buffy, we're going to take a short break. So everybody stay with us. We'll come back with more questions for Buffy Cushman-Patz. Stay with us.
This is Guy Kawasaki. If you want to learn how to be a remarkable person, please check out my podcast, Remarkable People. I interview people like Roy Yamaguchi, Margaret Atwood, Jane Goodall, Stephen Wolfram, Steven Pinker, Ariana Huffington, and Steve Wozniak. The point of the podcast is to help you become a little bit more remarkable. To learn more, go to remarkablepeople.com. Thank you.
Hawaii's business people and professionals want to support our public high school students across the state, like me, Law Yagovich, a senior at Ku'uku High School. And Hawaii's teachers and other educators want classroom speakers, curriculum advice, contest judges, mentors, and other support from businesses and nonprofits. The Climb High Bridge is Hawaii Department of Education's official platform to connect the two communities. It's like Match.com, specifically designed to connect businesses and schools. Learn more by sending an email to info@climbhigh.org. That's spelled CLIMBHI.org.
Hi, friends. Toy Hirschman here from the Entre Ed Talk podcast. I am super excited to support the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast hosted by none other than the amazing Josh Rappoon. And I also want to give a big shout out to all of the incredible educators in Hawaii who are doing unreal things in the entrepreneurship and design-based thinking spaces. I hope you all subscribe and listen to What School Could Be in Hawaii. And also, hey, why not check out the Entre Ed Talk podcast, where we interview stellar entrepreneurial educators and entrepreneurs from across the country and globe. I cannot wait to connect with you.
My name is Josh Rappoon, and this is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast. Today, we are with Buffy Cushman-Patz, the Executive Director of SEEQS, the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability. So, Buffy, you and I taught together at La Pietra, Hawaii School for Girls. While I was teaching history, Hawaiian studies, and economics, you were teaching chemistry, physics, geology, and math. And we founded La Pietra's National Honor Society together. We worked together on La Pietra's faculty forum and also reevaluating its block schedule. And you also advised its Green Club and independent projects and much more. So here's my question.
Josh, do you remember all that about me, or is that on my resume somewhere?
No, well, it's partly from your resume, but also partly what I remember together. And so in what ways did your experience teaching at La Pietra manifest itself in the DNA of SEEQS, which would come later? And I want to just add a caveat to this question, which is in no way, shape, or form do I want to throw La Pietra under the bus. But I also invite you to be straight about what it was that you wanted to do and what it was that you didn't want to do at SEEQS vis-a-vis your experience at La Pietra. And I have my feelings about that as well. So,
well, I would say there's a lot of things about what worked at La Pietra that are absolutely built into the concept of SEEQS, and then some places where I thought there was room for improvement that I did my best to improve in the design of SEEQS. But I'd say fundamentally, what I loved most about working at La Pietra was the students. I loved the students, and I really loved the way they interacted with each other.
Me too.
There's a sense of community there, and girls supporting each other. And I found, as a woman in science and math, I really enjoyed teaching science and math to young women, and showing them what was possible. At the time, that felt really meaningful and powerful to me to, I don't want to say defy stereotypes, but model something that maybe there weren't as many models of successful, folks whose brains work in this way. And really comfortable with it. And I think that environment, so anyway, an all-girls school is not what I created.
Right.
But what I did want to recreate was the community of comfort and asking questions, but also the support of each other, and especially in a multi-age environment. So even though the classes weren't, necessarily multi-age, a few of them are, but that 6th through 12th grade, I'd say that's another thing that was really meaningful to me. My first year at La Pietra, I taught 7th grade math, and then my last year at La Pietra, I taught those same 7th graders in physics as 12th graders, and I watched them graduate. And getting to watch the evolution of young women from 12 years old to graduating from high school was so incredibly rewarding. That I designed SEEQS to be a 6th through 12th grade school. Now, as you know, it is currently only a middle school, but it has always been designed to be a 6th through 12th grade school, and we're not yet high school grades because we're facilities limited, but it is absolutely designed to be a 6th through 12th grade school, middle and high school, so that students can have that opportunity to get exposure and then grow and develop and really bloom. So the community I really liked. I also, I liked the long blocks of time for students to really dig into things. And I think that was really, really important. So those long blocks of time, now how they were organized, I found a little bit frustrating as a teacher. Now, as an administrator, I understand all the variables that go into schedule creation and how complicated it is to make things work for students and for teachers. But at the time, as a teacher, I found it, I loved long chunks of time, and I wanted them to be a little bit more consistent. So I did my best to build that into the design for the SEEQS schedule. I definitely think that one of my fundamental values that went into SEEQS is how you spend your time is how you enact your values. And so the schedule, I really think how students spend their time and how teachers spend their time needs to be super intentional. And so I took elements of what I loved about how we spent our time at La Pietra, and I fixed the elements of what I didn't love about how we spent our time. And when I say we, I mean both students and teachers. Another feature that I really liked was the concept of advisory, which is, not unique to La Pietra. It's a concept in a lot of different schools. But the concept of, having that community, but I wanted more time with students. I wanted more time to have relationships with students that weren't just designed around academic content. And I would say that was a thing that, might have been my own teaching, my own responsibility that I felt as a teacher. This would have been true at any school, no matter what school. But as a chemistry teacher, I felt the responsibility for students to learn enough chemistry to be successful in their next class, in college, or if they were to become a scientist. So I really took every moment of the time that we had in chemistry class, and I made sure it was focused on chemistry. So I didn't, the only times I talked about myself or that we had these, conversations with students was in the time between classes or in advisory or when the students came in at lunchtime or when the students came in after school. And yet I could tell, well, first of all, they were really meaningful to me. The times that I loved the most were the times when I got to connect with students. And I could tell that was really meaningful for the students to get to connect with an adult who they respected about being a whole person. So, telling them what I did on the weekends or that I played in an ultimate frisbee tournament or whatever. I wouldn't do that during our 70 minutes or 80 minutes of class time. I would do it in the outside class time. But in SEEQS, I designed it into SEEQS for students and adults to have time to build relationships that are not just built around academic content. Wow. And they do that through our advisory and our physical activity blocks that are 40 minutes every morning of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then also they do a lot of it in EQS because EQS is so much of a co-learning experience and so much of an, in the field, working in a garden environment or designing, working in the stream. Those are such whole person experiences that students and teachers really get to develop those relationships. So,
wow. That's so interesting, Buffy, because that was actually going to be one of my follow-up questions was about time, and you've answered that. And I think what I pull away is I'm thinking all these conversations that I've had over the last few years with educators around this state, I think oftentimes time feels like a burden to them, and it sounds like at SEEQS, time is in its DNA is a great opportunity. It's a huge opportunity. You guys see it that way. Like time is our ally. Time is how we're going to shape time in a way that makes relationships possible and community possible and thoughtfulness and essential questions possible.
I mean, that is absolutely what went into the design of the SEEQS schedule for both students and teachers is how do we make sure, I would say as a person in life, I don't want to say just as a teacher or whatever, I hate having my time wasted. I really hate time not well spent. And I, as a school leader, I want to make sure that I just really want everything that we do to be intentional. So again, how you spend your time is how you enact your values. And so the work was, what do I value? What do we value in a school environment? We value physical activity because it engages the brain. We value interdisciplinary learning, but we also value disciplinary learning, and we value building community. And so making sure, and we also value collaboration time for teachers. We value teachers having time to do what they need to do as whole people. So there's some flex time built into our teacher schedule. But really evaluating it's worth saying. I was thinking about it as, back when I was doing the original design against a lack of collaborators, but the schedule is my brainchild. And it was really intentionally designed to make sure that everyone gets to spend their time in ways that reflect the values of the school. And I think that gets back to, if it doesn't reflect your values as a parent, as a student, as a teacher, then that's okay, but it just isn't necessarily the right place for you.
Right.
Because this is what we value. So try and be really clear about that. But Josh, I don't want to make it sound like we don't all feel pressed for time.
Oh, yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Every day, it is my number one stressor. Time stress is my number one stress as a working parent, as a person who's involved in a lot of different things, as a school leader. But one of my best friends said to me one time when I was like, I'm so busy, I don't have enough time. She said, Buffy, we all have 24 hours in a day. Right. Nobody has any more time than anyone else. And I think it's true. I mean, obviously it's true. It's obviously true. But I thought it was a really good perspective of we all just have to decide, how am I going to slice up my time? Because there's only 24 hours in a day for every single one of us. And so we've got to be thoughtful about, how do I want to spend those 24 hours? And I really think that each one of us needs to own that for ourselves. I want students to feel like they own that for themselves too. And yes, of course, there are structures and systems that we're a part of that make some of those decisions for us, including the concept of school, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And faculty meetings and whatever. But still, even within those, I think we can design structures, and we've intentionally designed structures that say, okay, well, now we're going to spend this time on this, and now we spend this time on this. But then it still takes work to be intentional and making sure that every moment is towards something you value.
Right. Okay, so related question. Again, same sort of preamble about the time that you and I spent together at La Pietra. Our approach to grading student work at La Pietra, and also for me in other contexts as well, when I taught at Ilani, it was conventional and traditional. Yet SEEQS' approach to assessing student work is very, very different. So why? If we had to trace the DNA of SEEQS' approach to assessing student learning and development, where would that tracing take us?
So I'm going to answer this question maybe not in the way that you're trying to set me up.
Okay. You take it wherever you want to go.
I'll answer it in the way that just... So I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old right now. And, the 2-year-old's obviously not in school. She goes to preschool, but whatever. School, kind of like whatever about school. My kids are learning all day, every day. It's what they do. It's what little people do as they're growing. And if you allow yourself to think about it, we as adults are learning all the time too. This concept of learning is, sometimes people think of learning as only this like really, really narrow definition of learning, but learning is getting better at something. We are always getting better at things, whether it's how to better have a conversation with your partner, or how to make a better omelet, or how to stop the mealybugs from growing on your tomato plants. I mean, we're just, everything in life is learning, right?
Right.
And we have this inherent sense, like not just inherent sense, like there's sometimes really obvious answers. It's like, did we get it right? Like, are my husband and I fighting, or do we have a successful, difficult conversation? Like, are the mealybugs gone, or are they here? Like, there's just some of these, is the omelet better, or is it terrible, right? Sometimes it's just really obvious, like, did it work? Was it successful? And I actually think a lot more times than we realize what success looks like, we have a really good sense of it. We have a really good sense as humans. If we allow ourselves to step away from being educators and teachers and in this, like, I have to grade students, but instead say, I actually know what it means to be successful here. And my job is to help students know what that success looks like and feels like too. I know what it is to be a scientist because I am a scientist. You know what it's like to really think like a historian because you do it too, right?
Yep.
Our job is to help students get that deep sense of what mastery looks and feels like. And so I just want to, this is always constant work because it takes some unlearning, right? We were all graded. Like that grading, that concept it takes the ownership of what success looks like away from the learner and gives it to someone else. And I mean, it's a fine line, right? Because there are things that adults do know better than students just from the collection of experiences that we have. And so I think our work as educators is to help students, A, have those experiences, and B, learn from our experiences that we've already had that identify, here's what success looks like, and I'm going to help you be able to identify it and work towards it.
Right.
So, when I think about assessment like that, I try and get us always back to that place of like our gut of, was this good enough? Is this quality? And I'm not thinking about like writing a paper. I'm thinking about like, did you collect meaningful data from your work at the stream? Sorry about my stream reference. We literally have a stream that runs through our campus right now. So there's a lot of stream work. But like, did you collect meaningful data that helps you understand the population of invasive versus native species? Because that's what you're trying to figure out. And so that's how you identify what success is. Like, can I learn the thing I'm trying to learn here? Can I know the thing I'm trying to know here? And then you have to work backwards to try and make sure that your rubrics and your standards and all those things really align with what we know about being human and what it means to be a successful, masterful human.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. And I've just all of a sudden my brain is firing off again about my childhood and where I grew up on Kaneohe Bay, and every single day outside of school was a process of just trying to get a little bit better at something, this, that, or the other, and trying to determine whether or not I was or not getting better. That's so cool. All right. So we're gonna shift directions here a little bit, and also I just want to, let our listeners know that you and I are going to be careful not to go too deep in the weeds on this one. But so back in October 2015, Buffy, after SEEQS had already been established, you and I and Mark Hines and some others collaborated to make happen Hawaii's first community screening of Ted Dintersmith's film, Most Likely to Succeed. I think about 125 people showed up for that event and its post-event panel discussion. So here's the question. In what ways is the DNA of SEEQS similar or different from the DNA of High Tech High in San Diego? And if we had to trace the DNA of SEEQS public displays of learning back to something, what would that something be? So actually there's kind of two parts to that question.
High Tech High was one of the many influences in the design of SEEQS. And I would say that, it was one of many. Another is the Met in Providence, Rhode Island, that has this internship-based school, and then some Waldorf approaches and Montessori and all these. So I would say that High Tech High wasn't necessarily a specific, it was a collection of best practices in meaningful learning experiences for students that I learned about over the course of, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this part of my history, but I spent a year doing a fellowship in Washington, D.C., where I got a lot of exposure to a lot of educators and schools and programs. And then I spent a year in graduate school in Massachusetts, where I got to spend a lot of time digging deeply into various schools and getting a lot of insider look at schools. And so, my approach is just observe, say, ooh, that looks good. Ooh, let's do that. Ooh, let's do that. And, public project exhibitions are clearly meaningful for students. And so we built them in. And I would say portfolio defenses are really meaningful and relevant learning experiences. So we built those in. Once our students are in high school, we will have internships because they're going to be really meaningful. And all of these are things I picked up from various schools in various places. And I would say that High Tech High actually wasn't, at the time of SEEQS' original design, it wasn't a singular influence. But it had lots of commonalities. Because I think Joshua would say that I think the reality is this isn't about individual schools. It's about what is learning.
Right.
What is learning truly? What learning truly is. And the reality is, as humans, if we could stop ourselves from thinking about schools as the place of learning and instead think of life as the place of learning, when we can get ourselves back to that thinking about learning, which again, it comes really natural as a parent, especially parents of young people, because they're really little ones, because they're just doing it all the time and you're around them a lot. But when we can get ourselves back to that place of learning, then we want to design schools to make for really powerful learning experiences. And I think they know that at High Tech High, and they know that at the Met, and they know that at Alt School, and they know that at all these different, and lots, but let me just also name, at so many of our Hawaiian focus charter schools, where the learning is authentic and it's based in cultural values and it's based in the real people and place that we are in and what we're doing and what meaningful work looks like, and, how to care for an ahupua'a, because let's get back to the sustainability element of this, of we actually need to sustain ourselves and life on Earth in a meaningful, healthy way. And Hawaiian focused charter schools are just really it's inherent in the design of so many of them. So there's so many different schools and school designs that have influenced what SEEQS is. But what I think all of us have in common is meaningful work.
Wow.
Meaningful learning experiences.
And within the DNA of SEEQS exists a mindset that says we are a collection of lots of really interesting things about learning, and that we're very open to ideas, as it will, that we're not a closed system that just operates efficiently over and over again every day. We're actually an open system. It's like open source in a way.
Almost to a fault, actually, because we're so susceptible to ideas, and we have a faculty of folks that are willing to try things and willing to iterate, but we can overwhelm ourselves and exhaust ourselves with all of the different things we're willing to try. But, everything's got its pros and cons.
Right. So along the same lines, Buffy, when I went down this kind of SEEQS genome rabbit hole, I got very interested in the DNA of your faculty. And you've referenced this already, but I had some trouble figuring out how to ask this question without it becoming like weirdly like an argument between intelligent design and Darwinian evolution, and with a touch of GMOs. But here goes. I'm just going to fire away. So when anyone reads all of the bios of SEEQS faculty and staff on your website,
you're like blown away, right?
Yeah. What I thought to myself is you have to come away with the feeling that there is a particular faculty and staff DNA at SEEQS. So if you can help me sort this out. So to what extent is that organic body of faculty and staff intentionally designed, and or to what extent is it like a wildflower bloom in the vast prairie grasses? If you, that's where my mind went. I was all over the place.
I would say that our faculty is, I think the most important thing we do at our school, and I'm really passionate about it, is a hiring process that is really designed to help us understand who people are that are interviewing, and then help them understand who we are, because at the beginning of the process, it's us selecting them, and at the end of the process, it's them selecting us. So it's a multi-step interview process that involves, it honestly self-selects, because you don't just apply to SEEQS with a resume and cover letter. We ask you to say, why am I a good fit for SEEQS? So that's it's kind of the filter of, you have to look at, it's all about fit. So, because if we have somebody that comes into SEEQS and thinks that lecture 80% of the time that they're in front of students is the way that they prefer to educate students, and that's not a fit. And just let us know that from the beginning. But honestly, they would figure it out because the first step of the interview process is read our website, learn about us, now tell us why you think you're a good fit for SEEQS. So people self-select through the interview process, and then we have a multi-stage interview process that involves showing us a portfolio of what you've done as an educator in the past. That also involves a sample teaching session with our students, and our students have a feedback protocol that lets them tell us. Now, they're not always the most spot on, but we learn a lot from teachers. We just get to see how teachers interact with kids, because obviously that matters more than anything else. And then the third round of interview process is a collaborative work session with existing SEEQS faculty, so that we can see how we work together, because our school is so interdependent. The interview process goes a really long way to making sure that folks that do join our SEEQS community know what they're joining into and want to join it and have value to add. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. And yes, very much. And Buffy, what I was just like thinking about this last night. And I guess, let me just ask it as a follow-up question, like to what extent does SEEQS as an entity shape the faculty as a group, and to what extent does the faculty shape itself? Do you see where I'm going with that? It's like, you might select a particular professional development opportunity that shapes the faculty, but then the faculty every single day, all day long, are actually shaping themselves as a kind of organic body. That's what I was really thinking about. Yeah.
And it's both. It's absolutely both. And it's part of my role and Lisa Kinsey's role as my role as executive director and Lisa Kinsey's role as school leader is to find the right balance of leading and shaping the direction that we head, from a strategic vision of what we are trying to be and what we were from the beginning, and then also letting the flowers grow, right? Letting those wildflowers grow that you were describing before. So it's a fine balance between those two. But I think in terms of, one of the things I was thinking about as you spoke was faculty and staff absolutely grow and become more SEEQS through their time at SEEQS because we do intentional work together, including, and we've been working on this, and I feel like we're finally getting somewhere that really feels good, but we've been working with our new faculty onboarding processes to help folks understand not just what we do, but why we do. So every structure and every meeting that happens in our school and every different part of the day for students is intentional, but those intentions can get lost over time unless you're actively working to help everyone understand this is the reason why we do this.
Right.
So that's a part of the intentional work of new faculty onboarding, and even our ongoing professional development is to cycle back to this is the why we do student. Every year before student-led conferences, we cycle back to this is why we do student-led conferences. These are the tenets of what makes them so special. And so, just yesterday at Faculty Professional Development, we had a couple of teachers do a role play of what a student-led conference can look like when it can go wrong, and here are the ways. And so we just do that constant cycling back to the things that matter to us. I think that's my role and Lisa's role as leaders is making sure that those core elements are brought back to the forefront over and over and over again.
Awesome. I want to come at it one more time with a follow-up, slightly different angle to this question. You have a faculty member, her first name is it Kara or Kara?
Kara. She actually is Kara.
Kara. So I spent a lot of time reading her bio, and nowhere in her bio, Buffy, do we find an undergraduate or graduate degree in math. On the contrary, she majored in psychology and minored in French. And yet she's one of your math teachers. And I was struck that was true for several people on your staff. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts about that. Let me first give a few props to Doc Shad, because Kata Shadrin just within the last few months finished her EDD and is now a Dr. Shadrin, and the students have dubbed her Doc Shad. And so I doubt
awesome.
that actually shows up on her bio yet.
No, not yet.
But I have a lot of thoughts about that, Josh, because I also taught math, and nowhere in my background did it say that I was, that I have any degrees in math. But, I could go really deep with this question a really long way, and I'll go with when I went to college over 20 years ago, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was majoring in. You somewhat arbitrarily pick a major, and then that becomes attached to your, credentials for the rest of your life, as though we knew when we were 19 years old what we wanted to do with the rest of our lives. I actually want my students to have some sense of what they want to do with the rest of their lives, but I don't think 20 or more years ago that was normal for folks to really know what they wanted to do for the rest of our lives. So you get a degree, and I think more than anything, my thoughts on this is that college is more about the experience of college and the learning that comes from the experience of college, and not so much about the specific degree you get, and that your actual ability to be successful and have pedagogical content knowledge comes from content knowledge, but also from the experience of teaching. And Kata has a degree in elementary education, and so she teaches 6th grade math, which is considered part of the elementary credential. And, I taught some college classes. And when you're teaching college classes, I would say 80-90% of your job is about the content. When you're teaching middle school, maybe 20% of your job is about the content.
Right.
And the other 80% is classroom management and building structures and connecting with kids and social emotional learning and working with parents. And so Kata has a lot of, we're talking about Kata specifically, but I know that you're asking about in general, right? Yep. People's experiences shape them more than their degrees do. I mean, sometimes a degree can be a really powerful experience, but I think their experiences shape them. And our teachers do become highly qualified for the subject areas that they teach. It's just that's not necessarily the degree that they originally got. And I think it comes because you learn about yourself as you grow, and that a lot of that happens after college, after you get that degree.
I remember, Buffy, that, I don't have a degree in government. I don't have a degree in civics or anything related to that in sociology. But the most powerful teaching experience I ever had over 17 years was a current issues course that I team taught with a young guy who is now in a school of journalism in New York City. Neither one of us had, degrees in current issues. But what we did together as collaborators was one of the most special, moments of my life. Okay. So, Buffy, we've actually come down to the end here. This is amazing. It's gone by like a shot here. So I'm going to return to something that you referenced earlier, which is the pandemic and adaptability. So up to now, we've not addressed the COVID-19 educational issues directly, but sometimes I feel like we're awash in 1,000 opinions and contentions across so many media platforms right now. Maybe so much so that it's become like white noise to a lot of people. So what in the design of SEEQS and the evolution of SEEQS made it as an organic being more adaptable to the pressures of a global pandemic that shows no signs of letting up or going away?
Okay, yes, it does go away. Please, let's let it go away.
Please let it go away. I know. It'll go away at some point.
We're living in a dystopian novel.
I know. Yeah.
But to your question, what makes SEEQS able to adapt? I mean, so there's some technical things and there's some adaptive things. On the technical side, we have a one-to-one Chromebook program, and we always have from the beginning. So our students already had the devices that made them able to go home with the devices and know how to function in a digital environment to turn in work, et cetera. That's just a technical thing, but it made a really big difference, right? Also, we have teachers. It's written into our job description that you need to be fluent with digital technology because we do so much digital collaboration at SEEQS as adults. And so our teachers were comfortable with the shift. It wasn't really that much of a shift when we needed to go to distance learning. Other things about SEEQS is that we value the meaningful learning experiences. I mean, actually, let me not even go along that train of thought. This global pandemic requires us, everyone in the world, to examine an essential question of sustainability.
Yes.
Examine multiple essential questions of sustainability and all of the things that are inherent in examining essential questions of sustainability. Like what does it take for our society to continue to exist? Do we want society to continue to exist as it has been? How do we keep ourselves and those around us healthy? And so many more essential questions. But what do our leaders have to consider as they're making decisions about what's best for the collection of us, rather than any individual sector or set of specific people? I mean, it's such complicated, complex stuff. And I think that our students and our teachers are really used to grappling with really complicated and complex stuff. And so they're able to continue to do so right now. But I think more than anything, I really hope everyone is examining the essential questions of sustainability that this pandemic has brought upon us right now, because you cannot evaluate just your own perspective right now. You've got to look at how this is affecting all different people in all different parts of the world. And you can't just think about the economics or the math part of it. You can't just think about the societal part of it, because everything is interconnected. And that is really, I think, the primary takeaway of examining essential questions of sustainability is that we are all interconnected, and that is so obvious right now in this pandemic. And so I don't know if that exactly answers your question of like, how were we better prepared for it, but it's how is it exactly the work that we were trying to set ourselves up for. It just, we thought we were setting our students up for a life beyond middle school and high school, but nope, we're going to have to examine a global essential question of sustainability right now in 2020. And maybe our students can teach their parents a little bit about how to think. Not that we have brilliant parents too, but just the act of thinking about complex things makes us more able to think about complex things and have more empathy and compassion for each other. And
I think Buffy, what really strikes me, going back to the previous question about your faculty, is that what all of that hard work that you've done with people over the years, with your faculty and staff, with your parent community, with your student community, and all of your community partners who help you in the learning process, all of that intentional relationship work is part of the process of surviving a really difficult moment like this. Absolutely.
It's the soil, right? Go back to that original model.
Right, that's where I was going to go. Right.
You can't grow anything. If you don't have soil.
Right.
And so the relationships are the soil.
Right. And in a pandemic where, in fact, if we don't want to stretch the metaphor too far, but, the little sprouts that are growing, and by the middle school level, they're growing fast and they're growing quickly and they're healthy. A pandemic can put a lot of pressure on that growth process, but ultimately if the soil is super rich and organic with lots of nutrients, then the community will survive and adapt and grow.
Right.
Wow. That gives me chicken skin, and it feels like a really great way, Buffy, to bring this interview to a close, this episode to a close. So Buffy Cushman-Patz, Executive Director of SEEQS, the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you today, and I hope you and your family and your greater SEEQS family stay very safe and healthy through this difficult moment.
Thanks, Josh. Right back at you. It was really fun to go deep and to talk about all these things that are built into SEEQS. And, we'll continue to adapt and survive, right? Adapt or die. We're going to survive, and we're going to thrive. And I hope that's true for all of us, because I think we're in an opportunity moment right now, and I think education can shift to really thinking about learning, and I hope that is a significant outcome of the time that we're living in right now.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely. Well said. Okay, Buffy, take care.
You too. Bye.
And now it's time for a listener review. This one comes from 3 Unicorns and is titled Mahalo for the Inspiration. This podcast is so inspirational and helps spark conversations around professional development, networking, and opportunities for people in education. I listen and appreciate the connections I have to this place as a person who lives in Hawaii. It gives me a local and global view of education theory and pedagogy. Thank you, 3 Unicorns. We appreciate your review, and we will continue to dig into the local and the global. The What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast is brought to you by Josh Rapoon Productions. Your host is me, Josh Rapoon. My editor, show consultant, and sound engineer is Daniel Gilad at DG Sound Creations. Daniel, an amazing musician, created the original theme music heard in these episodes. To learn more about Daniel or to hire him for your next music gig, see our show notes, where you will find his email address and Facebook URL. This series is funded by education change agent Ted Dintersmith, executive producer of the documentary film Most Likely to Succeed, and author of the best-selling book What School Could Be. Send your feedback to mltsinhawaii@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram @MLTSinHawaii. Also, please like our Most Likely to Succeed in Hawaii Facebook page and YouTube channel. If you like this series, please give us a rating and review at your favorite podcast store. Please stay safe, wear your masks, stay socially distant from one another, and bring kindness and compassion into the world. See you soon.